They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and it certainly can be. In some instances, it is worth a whole lot more. Photos provide an opportunity to take a look at the past and explore parts of our history we may have never known about otherwise. So today, we'll be taking a look at 3 interesting photos to see what information they can unveil. The Pompeii Man and the Stone. First off is a photograph that holds a terrifying truth about what happened to a man in Pompeii in 79 AD. The man was found during the eruption of Mount Vesuvius and appeared to be crushed by a large boulder. The body was unearthed in May 2018 by the Pompeii Archaeological Park and discovered that his death was most likely due to asphyxiation due to the pyroclastic flow from the volcano, rather than the boulder. During the eruption of Vesuvius nearly 2,000 years ago, it did not spew lava but instead it blew a large column of rock and ash. The pyroclastic flows followed down the mountain the next day, wiping out anything in its path. It is similar to a hurricane-force wind that could destroy anything in its way. It happens when the volcano boils over and fuels the deadly gas, ash and rock down the side of the volcano. A photo depicts the man under what looks like a large boulder, but after further investigation from experts, they realized that the photo is not exactly as it seems. It appeared as if the stone had severed the man's body and thought the rest would be beneath the stone. While the boulder may have in fact crushed the man, researchers believe that he would have lost his life long before that. Further research led to experts coming to realize that the site had been missing upper limbs, skulls, and the thorax, which could only lead to one plausible explanation: asphyxiation. Archaeologists also took a look at the tunnel below the body and discovered that it dated back to the Bourbon era of the 1700s and 1800s, which had caved in, causing part of the skeleton to fall away. Since discovering the man's remains, experts have also found parts of a small purse that the man was said to have clutched close to his chest. It contained 20 silver and 2 bronze coins that would have been enough to provide for a family of 3 for 2 weeks at that period of time. Researchers were also able to determine a rough age for the man. They believe he would have been at least 30 years old and also examined the lesions on the tibia, pointing to signs of bone infection that probably resulted in a limp which would have affected his attempt to escape the volcano. Whilst we do not know all of the details, the photo was able to help experts uncover more information and dive deeper into the life of this mysterious man. What do you think happened to him? Giant skull pile photo shows why bison almost went extinct. Our next interesting photo tells a story about American history through a bison. A photo that was taken in 1870 depicts a large pile of bison skulls with a man standing on the top. Whilst that alone is frightening, the skulls were to be ground into fertilizer. This points to a large number of American settlers that massacred the species. In 2016, the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate passed a bill to honor the bison, as they are the national mammal of the United States. Back in the day, there were as many as 60 million bison roaming the United States. They would be used to provide food, clothing, shelter, and fuel to many Americans. Native Americans to this day still consider the bison as a sacred animal, and look back on its history and give thanks. As settlers came to the United States in the 19th century, they slaughtered around 50 million bison. Some were used for food while others were killed for sport. They started to disappear rapidly, and by 1900 there were less than 1,000 bison left in North America. The railroad industry was also involved in the disappearance of bison herds. They were known to damage locomotives when trains were unable to stop in time, and herds could delay a train for days at a time or even ruin the engine. At the time, the railroads would hire marksmen to sit atop the trains and shoot the bison as they passed by. For a while, the United States Army even sanctioned and endorsed the wholesale slaughter of bison herds for many reasons, some being that it would allow ranchers to ranch their cattle without competition, and it would weaken the North American Indian population. In order to escape extinction, ranchers, conservationists, tribes, and politicians worked to keep the bison alive and well on American soil. Currently, there are about 500,000 bison living on non-public lands and about 30,000 on public lands that are controlled by the government. Did you know that bison were close to extinction at one point? If we didn't have a photo of the bison skulls, would we know the history behind it? It's difficult to say, but one thing's for sure, it's a good thing we stopped them from becoming extinct. James Dean's Porsche. Our last interesting photo is of James Dean's Porsche. The late actor passed away in 1955 when he was 24 years old and driving in California. He was in a Porsche 550 Spider and collided with a 1950 Ford Tudor, which was driven by a Navy veteran. While Dean was unable to survive the accident, his mechanic, Rolf Wutherich, was coming out on the other side alive and well. After the accident, there were many photos taken to be presented in court. There were 12 overhead views of the intersection and 18 ground-level photos, 9 of which were close-ups. 6 of the photos had inside and outside view of the Porsche that showed his racing number 130. When looking at the photos, Wutherich versus Turnipseed Dean Coulter was written in pencil. It referred to Wutherich's attempt to sue for the double-fractured jaw and torn left hip that left him to undergo multiple surgeries. Nothing came of the legal proceedings, and eventually Wutherich returned to Germany in 1957. Also in the photos was a signed letter from Robert A. Coyle, who was the son of Robert Everett Coyle, who was an attorney for the Turnipseed and his insurance company. The car went on to be sold for $5,335,000 at an auction, as it was sought after by many high-end collectors. Whilst the previous owner was a famous actor, that is not why it sold for so much. It was due to the unique story behind the death. Many believed the car to be cursed. The moment Dean bought it, he experienced problems with it. Many people also warned him about buying the car, one being Alec Guinness, who said that he'd be dead within a week if he drove that Porsche. What is most eerie about is that he died exactly 7 days after having that conversation and 2 hours after he got a speeding ticket whilst driving the car. Do you think that the car was cursed, or was it simply an accident? But what do you make of these 3 photos and their uncovered stories? A picture is worth 1,000 words. Ever since the invention of photography, we've been blessed or cursed with images that our ancestors could never have possibly imagined. From family photographs to disturbing, horrific photographs from crime scenes, an infinity of photographs have been taken since the 19th century. Throughout recent history, countless images have become infamous, but more remain undetected, hidden away with the cracks of time. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 rare photographs from the past and the stories behind them. Mad Jack Churchill. We often see photographs from days gone by, of people from another time wondering about their lives and what they accomplished in their life. Mad Jack Churchill being among such individuals. He led a legendary life, a motorcyclist, adventurer, surfer, plus a few more. Any officer who goes into action without his sword is improperly dressed, he was recorded saying. His real name was Lieutenant Colonel John Churchill, but most knew him as Mad Jack. According to sources, he would bring a Scottish broadsword with him into battle during the Second World War. Mad Jack had a dislike for modern weapons such as rifles and tanks, opting instead for a traditional means of melee combat. He used his sword and even his longbow during the war. Churchill was born in Hong Kong in the early 20th century. To the Director of Public Works in Hong Kong, Alec Churchill. The family lived there until 1917. It was during his childhood in Asia that his passion for adventure sparked, spending his youth exploring the cities and rural towns. This passion didn't fade when the family returned to England. Instead, it only grew. In 1926, he graduated from the Royal Military College in Sandhurst. Joining the Manchester, he spent most of his free time traveling around the country and experiencing everything he could. Moving to explore Kenya in 1936, where he even dabbled in acting. Soon thereafter, he had to pause his thirst for exploration and adventure as World War II exploded. He returned to his post in the British Army fighting in France. Due to his peculiar choice of weapon, he achieved the title of being the only British soldier to slay the enemy using a longbow. Churchill accompanied the Commandos, a special force unit created to raid against the Germans, who occupied territories of Europe. Churchill was a living legend, and claims of him playing the bagpipes and throwing grenades into battle were abundant, as he earned the name of Mad Jack. For his extraordinary efforts, he was gifted the Military Cross and Bar. He evidently enjoyed his time in the war, despite having been captured by the German and said to have played the bagpipes throughout his time in the services. He proceeded to join the Highland Light Infantry in British-occupied Palestine, where he assisted with the rescue and evacuation attempts for the country's civilians. After his increasing age became noticeable, he moved to Australia and taught as a military instructor until he retired entirely from the army in 1959. Despite his middle age, the craziness didn't cease. He spent the remainder of his days surfing, sailing the Thames, playing with model warships and enjoying his life, whilst confusing those around him with his eccentric personality. He passed away at the age of 89. Miscorrect posture. It's said that the past is another country, they do things differently there. This is even true when it comes to more recent history, such as the 1950s. Things that were once considered normal now spark confusion and distaste in our modern hearts. Beauty contests still exist. However, during the 1950s and 1960s, there was a fad for posture contests. In the early 19th century, the United States took an interest in chiropractors and the study of posture. The profession was still in its humble beginnings, and as a way of spreading popularity and gaining public interest in the research, prominent chiropractors of the time decided to begin a series of beauty contests to legitimize their vocation, obtain sponsorship, or sell contemporary beauty products, but to show renowned doctors this practice was valid. These pageants had several names throughout the years, but miscorrect posture was most commonly used. In Chicago, during the spring of 1956, there was a 7-day-long convention for chiropractors. At this week-long event, there was a beauty contest meant to highlight the doctoral practice in glamorized lights. The winner of this contest was an 18-year-old girl by the name of Lois Conway. The Chicago Tribune talked about the way the winners were chosen, explaining that X-rays and standing posture were heavily judged on top of their conventional beauty. Every contestant had to stand on a pair of scales, and the winning trio, first, second, and third place winners, were the ladies who were equally beautiful in the face and body as their weight spread perfectly from one foot to the other. The best posture, it was said, was the kind where your body weight is perfectly split from one to the other. These contests continued to happen for 2 decades, spreading through the United States like a wildfire. Connecticut, Salt Lake City, Alabama, Washington, miscorrect posture pageants took the country by storm, even being discussed in the weekly newspaper columns and popular magazines. The largest recorded posture pageant was in 1969 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. There, a certain chiropractor by the name of Dr. Hugg stated that these beauty showcases served their purpose ideally. They were never meant to live long, and were after a scheme to raise awareness, and that's exactly what happened. They concluded in the 1970s when their popularity plummeted, and the world moved on to other trends. Race organizers attempt to stop Kathrine Switzer from competing in the Boston Marathon. The stories behind photographs are often fascinating, if not disturbing or infuriating. In the case of this particular story, it's the latter. Kathrine Switzer was an extremely talented author, commentator, and marathon runner during the 1960s and 1970s. In fact, Switzer was the very first woman in the history of Boston to be a registered competitor in the city's 1967 marathon. At the time, women's sports were a heated subject, with many men believing women shouldn't compete in their activities, sports, and marathons. Switzer was the daughter of a major from the United States Army, having been born in Germany and spent her early childhood there. Later in her youth, her family moved back to America. She attained education at Lynchburg College in 1967, earning a bachelor's and master's by 1972. Though men claimed women were too delicate for the brutality of sports, Switzer persevered. Despite her trainers, Arnie Briggs claimed that she was a fragile woman. He agreed to let her test her abilities. He promised that if she managed to run the marathon's length in practice, he would bring her to the Boston Marathon of 1967. She was successful in this endeavor, and Briggs kept his end of the bargain, bringing her with him to Boston. The pair checked the official rulebook, and after noticing there was no mention of gender, so no rule stating she couldn't compete, she registered with her AAU number, paid the race fee, and acquired the necessary certificate of fitness, following every rule to a T. Her father and boyfriend were both extremely supportive of her attempts and did their best to spark enthusiasm in her despite the oppressive circumstances of her situation. Her desire to succeed made her the first woman to ever compete in a Boston Marathon. It didn't come without a price. During the run, the race manager, Jock Semple, attempted to forcibly remove her bib to have her disqualified. Consistently, he tried to physically assault her until Briggs and Thomas Miller, her boyfriend, shoved the man to the ground as a way of protecting her from his malicious intentions and sexist views. Despite Semple's efforts, Switzer completed the marathon as the number 261. Her victory resulted in a tragedy. The AUU, appalled with her actions and taking Semple's side, officiated a ban for all women, not allowing them to participate in any marathons or sporting events until 1972. Semple claimed her allowance in the marathon was an error and an oversight, and the sports industry vehemently agreed with his claims. Women can't run in the marathon because the rules forbid it. Unless we have rules, society will be in chaos. I don't make the rules, but I try to carry them out. We have no space in the marathon for an unauthorized person, even a man. If that girl were my daughter, I would spank her, said one of the marathon organizers. In her memoirs, Switzer wrote, "I knew if I quit, nobody would ever believe that women had the capability to run 26+ miles. If I quit, everybody would say it was a publicity stunt. If I quit, it would set women's sports back way back instead of forward. If I quit, I'd never run Boston. If I quit, Jock Semple and all those like him would win. My fear and humiliation turned to anger." Indeed, a photograph says 1,000 words, and yet what often remains unsaid is worth finding out. Stories hidden behind these images we see scattered around the internet are often worth discovering, for they hold crucial, covered fragments of our human history. So what do you make of these 3 photos that hold a rare historical story? This past year has been a revolving door of bad news, one after the other. It seems as if 2020 is a cursed year, and it tried to pack in as many newsworthy events as possible in these 12 months. Although it feels as if everything in the world has temporarily stopped working, scientists remind us time and time again that the universe is constantly waiting to show us something new. So today we'll be taking a look at some recent discoveries. A 1,000-year-old Viking hoard found in Scotland. In 2014, an amateur metal detector enthusiast named Derek McLennan unearthed the largest Viking hoard found in modern history. He discovered over 100 artifacts dating back to the 9th and 10th century in Galloway, Scotland. Consequently, the hoard was given the nickname the Galloway Hoard. The hoard is valued at around £2 million. The finder, McLennan, earned a percentage of this. He shared his large earnings with the church, whose land the artifacts were found on. Among the pieces discovered was the largest silver Carolingian pot from Germany ever found. This alone was estimated to be worth almost £250,000. After about 2 years of being unearthed, the pot was finally opened by Scotland's. They spent months diligently working on this detailed conservation project. They ended up taking a CT scan of the pot to determine what was inside and how best to open it without damaging anything. Once inside, they found Irish brooches, silver and gold objects, Turkish silks, crystals, and a solid silver cross and armbands. This discovery is immensely significant to the history of Western Europe. It showcases how vast the Vikings' connection to the continent was. Although it was already known that the Vikings raided the continent, it still provides an insight into the Vikings' thoughts. The jewelry came from all over Europe and was amassed over generations, illustrating the interactions between the Vikings and their different people in early medieval Scotland. They reveal what was important and regal to them, but not why. What about these pieces were so significant to their cultural identity? Why were they collected over time, placed in an expensive vase, and subsequently buried? This is still one mystery that researchers will continue to agonize over. The hoard was quickly acquired by the National Museum Scotland. Law dictates that any treasure found with no known owner automatically becomes property of the Queen and the government. They've gone to painstaking levels to carry out as detailed as a conservation work as possible. The collection has been carefully examined and preserved over the past few years. It's been on display in museums all around the UK, but will now be brought back to the area where it was first found. Originally intended to be displayed in the Kirkcudbright galleries this year, it will be first shown at the National Museums of Scotland, then returned to Kirkcudbright from August 2021 to May 2022. Ice melt in Alaska threatens to unleash a mega tsunami. Earlier this year, in an open letter to the Alaska Department of Natural Resources, scientists warned the government of a potential tsunami in the Prince William Sound in southern Alaska. They fear that a massive rock landslide might occur due to glacial melting in the Barry Arm along the south coast of Alaska, which would then trigger a catastrophic tsunami. Using satellite imagery, they explain that Barry Glacier is retreating from Barry Arm and exposing a large slope of rock face called a scarp. If this scarp were to suddenly fall, it could generate tsunamis that would threaten the people, marine life, and infrastructure around the coast. Although no one lives there, this location is 30 miles northeast of Whittier, Alaska, which has a population of about 200 people. It's also frequented by commercial and recreational boats throughout the year. The effects of the landslide and tsunami would spread throughout, with the potential to reach even Whittier. This glacial melting is caused by climate change and is a concern for the entire world, not just Alaska. When the climate changes too quickly, the surrounding land can't adjust in time. Landslides and tsunamis are a threat to many other places around the world because of climate change. The scientists state that this scarp is already moving and has been for a long time now, albeit very slowly. They fear that prolonged rain, earthquakes, or hot weather would trigger the speed and result in a landslide. The group of scientists consists of researchers from well-known institutions such as Ohio State University and various U.S. geological surveys. According to the geophysicist Chun-Li Day, they calculated that the collapse of the scarp deposits 16 times more debris and release 11 times more energy than the Alaskan Lichua Bay landslide and megatsunami of the 1950s. The Lichua Bay megatsunami is the largest tsunami in modern history, larger even than the Japanese tsunami of 2011, though not as deadly. The Lichua Bay earthquake deposited almost 90 million tons of rock, was heard 50 miles away, and displaced water up to an elevation of 1,720 feet high. It's some cause for concern when experts post that we're waiting for a landslide, and could be even more destructive. Scientists are continually monitoring the retreating glacier and scarp. They're collecting satellite and airborne data in order to generate as many possible scenarios as accurately as they can. There is still uncertainty, though. Scientists cannot predict exactly what will happen. They only have their fears and suspicions. Even so, they're working together with the state and federal government emergency teams to create a reliable early warning system to rapidly notify citizens in the case of a landslide and tsunami. They want citizens to participate in meetings to stay informed and have emergency plans prepared in case of disaster. Could potentially see the landslide occur within the year. As they continue to observe the glacial retreating, all we can do is hope that these are just unfounded fears and that their calculations are wrong. Radio telescope discovers Elagast planet. Recently, scientists have discovered a superplanet using the low-frequency array, otherwise known as the LOFAR radio telescope. They decided to name it BDRJ 17503809. Although given this long name, they've nicknamed it Elagast for ease of use. Their observations from the telescope revealed that Elagast is a brown dwarf, is a celestial body that's too small to be a star, but too big to be a planet. They're often referred to as the failed stars of the universe, which is quite the unfortunate nickname. Brown dwarfs are dim and cold, since they don't have the same nuclear fusion reactions as other bright stars like our sun. They don't have enough mass to trigger a hydrogen fusion. This makes them difficult for scientists to find using the normal methods of discovery. For the past 25 years, stars, and planets have almost all been discovered using infrared instruments. Researchers have mostly been using the heat signature of nuclear reactions to locate new celestial bodies. Brown dwarfs might be too small and cold for conventional methods, but they do emit light at radio wavelengths. Radio telescopes study the radio frequency that astronomical objects emit. They use extremely large dish antennas to pick up the weak radio waves from planets, stars, and other galaxies. These telescopes can sometimes have a difficult time picking up astronomical frequencies because of all the interruptions and distractions from other modern human radio electronics. They can even receive interference from weather patterns like wind and temperature. The radio waves they receive from space are weaker than our cell phone signals. The telescopes focus on those weak waves and amplify them, so that researchers can analyze them. Elagas is the first dwarf planet to be found using a radio telescope instead of an infrared one. Researchers in the Netherlands decided to just cast out radio wavelengths from a low-file radio telescope over random areas of the universe instead of only observing already catalogued dwarf planets. In order to detect anything, the telescope must focus on an astronomical source for hours, collecting all the frequencies, then averaging them out. The researchers weren't expecting to find anything noteworthy, so they were especially surprised when they picked up on a faint brown dwarf. Sometimes you find the best things when you least expect them. These findings are exciting astronomers everywhere because they allow for possibilities of finding other cold and faint celestial bodies, such as gas giant exoplanets, just by using radio. They had never thought to use radios to pick up on new planets and stars. They've only ever found brown dwarfs using infrared, then continued to observe the radio telescopes. They now have a method to find cold objects floating within the sun's vicinity that would otherwise have been too difficult to discover with an infrared survey. It's a game changer for them. The researchers first discovered Elagas using the Lofer radio telescope in the Netherlands. They then confirmed their results with the International Gemini Observatory and the NASA Infrared Telescope Facility in Hawaii. It's exciting to see what else scientists find using radio telescopes in the future. So what do you make of these recent exciting discoveries? Although archaeology may not be everyone's idea of a fun subject, when you start to delve a little deeper into it, the study of the human past through the examination of material remains reveals a most fascinating field of study. The digs in the desert to find Egyptian mummies or old Viking tombs that Hollywood glamorizes certainly have their place. But there is more to archaeology than just the film-worthy stuff. You'd be forgiven for thinking that archaeology is a study of the past, those departed from life and the long forgotten. But in reality, the discipline is a study of humans, and more specifically human life. You see, it's important to understand how people lived before us, even if it was thousands of years ago. Some of the world's oldest but best-known civilizations, such as the Roman, Egyptian, Greek, or Mayan empires, give us an invaluable insight into how society has developed over the years. In other words, it shows us why we live and learn the way we do today, and the best thing is that there is always more to discover. So today, we'll be taking a look at 3 fascinating recent archaeological discoveries. Israeli zoo finds Roman sarcophagi while building new animal hospital. You may be wondering what a sarcophagi is. Sarcophagi is the plural form of the word sarcophagus, which is essentially a coffin but made of stone and often elaborately decorated. They tend to be associated with ancient Greece, Rome, or Egypt, and would have held the bodies of aristocratic members of those dynasties. In mid to late February 2021, a group of construction workers at a zoo in Israel were tasked with building a new animal hospital. The task was not particularly groundbreaking, and as far as the workers were concerned, they were simply heading for another day on the job. The Ramat Gan Safari Park, where the hospital is to be located, is situated in the Israeli capital of Tel Aviv. The site covers some 250 acres, allowing various animals originating from the vast plains of Africa to be viewed by members of the public in a safari-style experience. Whilst the construction team were digging the foundations of the new hospital, they stumbled across 2 huge slabs of stone. They measured about 6 feet 5 inches in length and baffled the excavators. None of the workers really understood what the structures were, but had them lifted out of the earth and handed them over to local archaeologists. A few days later, the Friends of the Israel Antiques Authority explained that their things were actually sarcophagi, and funnily enough had actually been discovered some 25 years earlier in another part of the park. However, the original discoverers of the sarcophagi, another group of contractors who had previously undertaken a building project at the zoo, did not think anything of them, and simply dumped them in another part of the park. One of the sarcophagi had been damaged in the original find, and somebody had even tried to cover up the break with some concrete. The original contractors had intended to move the sarcophagi once they had finished their work, but the coffins were forgotten about and, over the years, were covered over by sand and vegetation, until the present day, that is. The sarcophagi were decorated with flowers and discs, an ancient religious symbol thought to protect the deceased. Made of limestone, they were also fairly fragile, hence how one had been damaged previously. Researchers are not entirely sure who the sarcophagi belonged to, other than that they were of high social status. The tombs are not Jewish, as verified by research, but one academic did have a theory that they could be related to the Third Jewish Revolt against the Romans. The location of the zoo lies on the remains of what is thought to be an ancient city called Bnei Brak, which was connected to the revolt. However, once again, researchers cannot be completely sure. The tombs are not currently known to contain human remains, but scholars are confident that they belong to a husband and wife, given the near-identical decorations on the sarcophagus. The T-Rex's cousin. Everybody has heard of Tyrannosaurus rex, the flesh-eating, bloodthirsty king of the dinosaurs. Immortalized in literature, film, and the arts, T-Rex has become a figurehead of the prehistoric era, some 66 million years ago. The Earth that the dinosaurs inhabited looked vastly different from the one we know today, with the continents arranged in different positions. Not only this, but of course, human beings did not exist. As a matter of fact, our first human ancestors would not appear for over 50 million years after the dinosaurs became extinct, and for most of the Jurassic period the world was split into only two supercontinents called Laurasia and Gondwana. The dinosaurs survived the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event at the end of the first part of the Mesozoic era, which was the period spanning about 190 million years in which the dinosaurs existed. These creatures were pretty tough, but perhaps none more so than the infamous T-Rex, which many assume to be the most dangerous dinosaur that ever lived. But the T-Rex had ancestors, and dinosaurs similar to this most ferocious of predators lived millions of years before it existed. In early February 2021, scientists and archaeologists released details of a new species of T-Rex that originated from what is now Canada, Alberta, to be specific, on the banks of the Bow River. Thought to be around 79 million years old, this dinosaur was some 8 feet tall at the hip and grew to around 26 feet in length. Although not as big as the T-Rex, this dinosaur had a truly terrifying appearance and was aptly named the Reaper of Death, derived from its Greek name, and we will refer to it as the Reaper. The T-Rex and the Reaper share several features, including their sharp teeth capable of ripping any mammal to shreds. However, the Reaper is distinguished through the ridge that covers its eyes. It's been 50 years since any tyrannosaurid was discovered in Canada. And for researchers, the Reaper is the oldest known variant of the species ever found. In Canada, world's oldest brewery discovered in Egyptian archaeological dig. Like many other countries all around the world, Egypt has suffered from a huge drop in tourism over the past year due to everything that has happened. Normally a hugely visited country on account of its many historical treasures, Egypt is hoping to draw visitors back in their droves once the pandemic is over to the exciting discovery by Egyptian and American archaeologists of what is thought to be the world's oldest brewery, situated in an ancient burial site in Abydos in southern Egypt. The ancient factory dates back some 5,000 years to the reign of King Nama, considered to be the unifier of Egypt. First discovered by British archaeologist T. Eric Peat over 100 years ago, but then lost due to difficulty in establishing its location, the site was rediscovered in 2018 using magnetic surveying techniques. Comprising of 8 large sections, each measuring 65 feet by 8 feet and containing 40 earthenware urns set out in 2 rows, the industrial-scale brewery would have been capable of producing almost 5,900 gallons of beer at a time by heating large amounts of grains and water in the vats. According to New York University's Matthew Adams, who co-led the archaeological team, the factory appeared to have been built specifically at Abydos to provide beer for rituals inside funeral facilities for the kings of Egypt. Indeed, written records from ancient Egyptian civilizations indicate that, unlikely as it may seem, beer was an important drink in ancient Egypt, as it was not only used in funeral rituals to honor dead pharaohs, but also in sacrificial rites. After hearing today's stories, you can see that there is a lot more to archaeology than dusty old pots and pans. Sure, history isn't for everybody, but it's fascinating to know that so many revealing things have been discovered, and that there are still so many more exciting things to discover buried deep beneath our feet. What do you make of these 3 recent discoveries? The jungles of our world have long been at the center of many mysteries. Its vast expanse and hazardous undergrowth leaves many to wonder what exactly lies at the heart of that tangle of vines. Occasionally, discoveries are made that answer some of these questions, while others only leave us with even more uncertain puzzles. So today, we'll be taking a look at 3 interesting jungle discoveries and mysteries. The mystery of the Billy apes. Over a century ago, Belgian colonizers found a large primate skull during their rampage in the northern Congo. The locals would tell them stories of mysterious large apes that would attack and eat lions. Gorillas were never before found in this region of northern Congo, so researchers and explorers were confused and intrigued. They believed it to be an entirely new species of ape, although they never found any additional evidence or proof of life. The skull was promptly left to collect dust in the Royal Museum for Central Africa in Belgium until the 1990s, when Carl Eamon read about them in a scientific article. He was a Swiss-born photographer and devoted conservationist. Enraptured by the skull's puzzle, he set off on an adventure through the dense jungles that few had traversed before. The Billy Uli Tropical Forest covers 12,000 square miles and is a mix of impenetrable canopy and large stretches of savanna. The researchers had to trek through an impenetrable underbrush full of ants, mosquitoes, and bees that were drawn to their sweat. Despite being such a difficult undertaking, a man ended up repeatedly visiting the forest over the span of 10 years with various rangers, camera crew, and primatologists trying to find the elusive Billy apes. On his first trip, he found another ape skull, which only increased his obsession. In 2004, American primatologist Cleve Hicks joined the search. He spent weeks traversing through the forest trying to find the apes. He and his team set up motion-detecting cameras and eventually captured images of the elusive Billy apes. As it turns out, they were not a new species. They were chimpanzees. However, they were unlike any chimpanzees the researchers had seen before. They had larger skulls and feet than other chimpanzees. Their behavior was unique in that they nested on the ground like gorillas instead of in the canopy. They also used the longest tools researchers had seen in Africa to collect ants and honey. On one expedition, researchers came across a chimpanzee eating a leopard, although they did not know whether the chimp had attacked it or not. The locals called them lion destroyers and explained that even their poison darts would not affect the apes. Hicks stated that they were the largest population of wild chimpanzees anywhere in the world. He claimed that they were curious of the humans rather than fearful, which led him to believe that they had never seen humans before. Those that lived closer to civilization would flee when approached, but the apes further in would gather close to observe before quietly leaving. Since they lived in such remote parts of the jungle, it was near impossible for poachers or any other humans to encounter them. Today, though, the forest is a hiding spot for many fugitives or rebel groups and is being turned into farms. The disappearance of Bruno Manza on May 25, 2000. Swiss environmentalist Bruno Manza disappeared in the Borneo forests and has never been seen since. He was declared legally deceased 5 years later as there was no sign or evidence of him found. He was 45 at the time and had spent the past 10 years fighting the Malaysian government and logging companies on behalf of the Penan, the indigenous jungle nomads of Borneo. Manza wanted to live a life without consumerism, capitalism, and technological advancements. As a young adult, he refused the Swiss military draft and served a few months in jail. He then moved to the Alps to work as a cow and sheep herder and learned how to make his own tools and food. He became enchanted with this type of simple living. Switzerland was not enough for him. So at 30 years old, he traveled to Borneo. He soon learned about the Penan nomadic tribes and decided to try and find them and live with them. After searching the dense Sarawak jungle in Malaysia, he finally came in contact with them in May 1984. After some time, the Penan accepted his presence and he began to learn their language and culture. He grew out his hair into their traditional mullet, wore a loincloth, walked barefoot, and even hunted with a blow dart. The Penan nicknamed him Laki Penan, which means Penan man. They respected him and considered him one of their own. The politics in Borneo grew more complicated and aggressive as the government backed the logging companies who were destroying the forests and desecrating sacred lands. The deforestation contaminated their drinking water, significantly reduced the vegetation and game, and limited the tribe in their movements. Munsa began to work alongside the Penan in their attempts to thwart the loggers. Over the next decade, he would go back almost every year to visit the tribe, usually by illegally crossing the border out of Indonesia to get to them, and would assist them in their battle with the loggers. He traveled the world and held lectures, protests, and strikes to garner attention to the Penan's plight. He set up a fund to give aid to the indigenous people in the forest. And the cause eventually gained notoriety around the world. Politicians and leaders around the world condemned the deforestation, which angered the Malaysian government. They denied him entry and put a bounty on his head when he swam across the border at night. He was enemy number one of the state and escaped capture numerous times by using a fake passport and changing his appearance, running away while an officer was distracted, and using the rivers and forest undergrowth to hide. In February of 2000, Munsa began his last trek to the Sarawak forest. He first traveled with the secretary of his fund, BMF, and a film crew. After a while they left, and he continued with a different friend for a few weeks until they arrived at the Sarawak-Kalimantan border. Munsa, aided by a local guide, crossed the border on the 22nd of May. The last known sighting of him was on May 25th, when a local Penan and his son journeyed with him to the mountain Bukit Batu Loi. Munsa intended to ascend the mountain alone. Searches and expeditions were conducted by Penan teams and members of the BMF, but to no avail. There were conspiracies that the Malaysian government ended his life, but those close to him believe he either fell down the mountain or took his own life. After his disappearance, he was awarded the International Society for Human Rights Prize and had a new species of goblin spider named after him. 10 years after his disappearance, a memorial service was held in Basel, Switzerland, to which 500 people attended. There have been films and books made about his story. Ho Vang Lan, the real-life Tarzan. Ho Vang Lan was just a toddler when his father, Ho Van Tan, took him into the forest in central Vietnam to live for the next 40 years. In 1972, Tan was a soldier in the Vietnam War when a U.S. bomb ended the life of his wife and 2 other sons in their home. He left behind the youngest son, Trey, and moved into the forest with Lan, where they completely isolated themselves from others. They taught themselves survival skills and fashioned tools out of the things they found in the jungle. They lived in a treehouse and grew their own produce to live off. Lang even wore a loincloth that he fashioned out of tree bark. Although Tan chose to remove himself and his son from society, they were occasionally spotted by locals who reported it to the authorities. When Tri was 12 years old, he traveled with his uncle into the forest to look for his family. He eventually found them, but his father's mental health had severely declined, so that he did not recognize his youngest son and barely spoke. Lang, however, was eager to meet another person. Although his speech capabilities were limited since his father did not speak much, he was excited to meet his brother. Tri was unable to convince his father and brother to return to the village and integrate into modern society. They remained living in the forest, and Tri returned once or twice a year to visit them and bring them rice and other supplies. In 2013, Lang left the forest for the first time at 41 years old. He and his father went back to the village after Tri convinced them, as their father's health was rapidly deteriorating. Lang learned to cope well with the change in lifestyle, but he still preferred the jungle. He learned how to take care of buffalo, to chop bamboo, and rat out to sell, and found out that he had an allergy to beer. He struggled with the concept of money and was incredibly shy and nervous around women, as he had never seen one before. He spent most of his time walking into the fields to be close to the forest. Their father passed away in 2017. Lang grew tired of the village and wanted to be out in the field all day. It was almost a 3-hour walk, so he would leave for the he eventually stopped coming back as often and built a hut nearby in the forest. He now grows corn and banana, which he sells to the villagers along with any small game he catches. Lang returns a few nights a month to stay with his brother, but prefers the simplicity and comfortability of the jungle. But what do you make of these jungle discoveries and mysteries? Have you ever been somewhere and got the chills? Felt like someone was watching you? Well, so did the people who entered these hallowed places. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 haunted hospitals. Connecticut Valley Hospital. Not all places that are abandoned are haunted, but more concerning, not all haunted places are completely abandoned. The Connecticut State Hospital in Middletown is also known as the Connecticut Asylum for the Insane. Connecticut has a littered past of state-run hospitals with twisted and complex histories, but this one in particular has the most spine-chilling occurrences. If you head down Route 9 through Middletown, you might notice a collection of buildings off to the southeast, on a hilltop overlooking the city, red brick buildings looming over the whole town. These decaying structures are remnants of the past that have lingered well into the future. The hospital once held as many as 3,200 patients and was a fully functioning institution. They had a series of neglect issues within the walls of the hospital. Everything from a patient ingesting batteries, a steel nail, a razor, a top of a beer can, paper clips, and even inserted pens. 10 employees were actually charged in the case, and more than 30 were put on administrative leave. The abuse was systemic and it was terrible. The hospital was not always this way. It used to be a manicured and pleasant place for the people who stayed there. It was not until the state forced more people into it, institutionalizing not only the chronically ill, but the criminally insane, which left the hospital unable to handle the new conditions. The buildings, still in operation, stand as a cold reminder of the things that occurred within them. The ghostly environment is said to be bone-chilling and eerie. No one is allowed in or out, and what happens on the hill remains a mystery. The Eloise Complex. Have you ever heard of a place so haunted that it sold for only $1? The Eloise Complex in Michigan did exactly that. This place is listed as one of the top 10 most haunted places in Michigan. And for good reason. It's the site of the horrors of human testing, gross neglect, and even attacks leading to loss of lives. It is said that the excavators found jars of human parts. The Guardian says that in its prime 12,000 people are cohabitated. The complex had its own police and fire departments, a post office, cattle herds, a greenhouse, a cannery, and a tobacco field. It was such a substantial plot of land that at one point maintained its own zip code. As time went on, unused buildings at the site were shut and subsequently destroyed. Eventually, large parcels of the site were sold to the Ford Motor Company, while others were developed into an 18-hole golf course. What previously existed as space for the farmland has since been replaced by a strip of mall and condominiums. Since that time, though, the hospital has devolved into a worse version of itself, and is the subject of many questions ever since its horrific reports. A team of ghost hunters investigated the mansion in 2019 and reported that they began to lose their grip on reality. Hearing unexplained screams, slamming doors, and rampant poltergeist activity. They had investigated the basement that had been previously unseen due to flooding. There is much conversation in the town as to whether or not ghosts do in fact exist, and one of the investigators says he has no doubt. A video which was posted to social media, viewers began to point out at an hour and 2 minutes in there could potentially be something paranormal, a light anomaly. The ghost hunters then stated, "We're looking back at the raw footage now to see if we can explain it. And it seems to me that there is something out there." The ghost hunters expressed the likelihood that the Eloise complex is haunted. Going on to state, the scientific world has not completely developed an understanding of what this is yet, but it does not mean we won't in the future. The asylum now is zoned for commercial use. The $1 amount being sold to a developer who has promised to make the hospital grounds into some kind of commercial development, to make the whole thing into something the town can actually use. Hopefully, this turnover creates a new purpose and new life for the Erie acreage. Danvers State Hospital. Danvers State Hospital is among the list of most haunted places in America, and for good reason. It was built in 1874 and opened in 1878 under the supervision of architect Nathaniel Jeremiah Bradley in rural Massachusetts. It was built according to a system called the Kirkbride Plan. This structure of building was specifically organized in a way that provided the patients with natural light and air circulation. Thomas Kirkbride thought that these aspects would help with the healing and mental health of the patients. These buildings were all also connected by tunnels. The original plan for the hospital was to house only 500 patients, with potentially room for up to 1,000 more in the attic. However, by the late 1930s, over 2,000 patients were being housed and the overcrowding was severe. There were even people in the basement of the hospital by the 40s. The hospital was established to provide residential treatments for the mentally ill, but its functions expanded to include training programs for nurses in 1889 and also a research laboratory in 1895. Mechanical restraint was deemed unnecessary in the cases of the mentally ill. Reports were made that various shock treatments, lobotomies, medication, and straitjackets were being used to keep the crowded and boisterous hospital under control. To 2,360, and a total of 278 people passed away that same year. Experts often called Danvers Hospital the birthplace of the prefrontal lobotomy. Even worse, the hospital cemetery held over 770 bodies and headstones, which only had numbers, not names. The entire campus was officially closed in 1992, and all patients were promptly transferred to other facilities. In 2005, the property was sold to a residential apartment developer. Demolition of most of the buildings was started. Even though the building was listed under historical sites, this did not slow down the plans. The Historical Society was immensely disappointed that the building was demolished. The Danvers State Hospital is said to have been the inspiration for H.P. Lovecraft's Arkham Sanitarium. Its Gothic style and creepy nature. It is the inspiration for many horror fans and filmmakers. Visitors of the hospital reported patients aimlessly walking the halls or staring into walls. People who have gone into the hospital when it was freshly abandoned say that they have heard ghostly voices and cries of patients asking for help and attention. The torture and abuse from the hospital's operations stayed within the walls of the place until its demolition, and even after, the grounds hold a creepy feeling. We have seen that the walls of psych hospitals can be riddled by their history, and clearly these 3 locations are an example of that. There is always more to the story behind those tall gates. Magical abilities of the Bosnian pyramids. The Earth might be tiny compared to other planets, but it for sure has a lot of variety. One mysterious structure that has caused many to ask questions is that of the pyramids of Bosnia. The pyramids of Giza are truly impressive, but the giant pyramids of Bosnia are just as impressive. One of the local archaeologists in Bosnia made a claim related to the Bosnian pyramids. He believes they are at least 30,000 years old, which is 20,000 years earlier than what our history taught us. The Bosnian pyramids are a massive complex of 5 different pyramids. The entire complex can be found near a small town 30 kilometers northwest of Sarajevo in Bosnia. Some of the scientists refuse to even look at them, and they claim that the archaeologist is just trying to secure funding and get more tourists in Bosnia. Not all of the scientists refused to know more. Organic fossils have been found inside the chambers that have been excavated. The find suggests that the pyramids are approximately 30,000 years old. This is surprising considering we have been taught that the ancient structures were not nearly as old as this. Just like the Egyptian pyramids, the pyramids of Bosnia also orient to the cosmic north. What makes the pyramids of Bosnia so special is the fact they are 15 times more accurate than the Pyramid of Giza. The top of each pyramid, dragon, sun, and moon, also forms a flawlessly perfect equilateral triangle. Another interesting discovery is that researchers have detected and measured an energy beam that gets released from the top of the Bosnian pyramid. What surprised the researchers is that when the distances increase, the energy beam does not become weaker. Incredibly, it actually becomes stronger and more intense. Tests have been carried out, and it was reported that the energy beam has a diameter of between 5 and 9 meters. Some archaeologists have called the pyramid an energy machine. The underground chambers of the pyramids seem to feature ionization levels that are much higher than the outside. Some even suggest that the pyramid and the energy it gives off have different healing properties. Have researchers found a 300-million-year-old screw embedded into rock? Finding fossilized remains in ancient rock is one thing, but how about a 100-million-year-old screw that isn't even from this planet? A Russian team sent to investigate a meteorite crater in the region of Kalaga, western Russia, only expected to find space rock and rubble, but instead found something even more extraterrestrial. Near to the crater hole, the team happened upon a rock dislodged and partially fragmented by the impact of the nearby meteorite. What they found in there was a very strange object, the curiousness of which needed further scientific analysis to confirm exactly what they had found. A paleontological analysis was performed, and it was confirmed that in the center of the rock itself was a screw, not placed there by human design, but rather strongly embedded within, suggesting it had fallen to the ground at some point, only to be encased over time. Tests showed that the iron atoms of the screw and silicon rock atoms spread and fused together, confirming that the screw and rock had been in each other's company for a significant time. It was also concluded that the screw was not the result of natural process, but indeed artificially fashioned. What was even more strange, however, was what geologists said about the age of the rock. Radiocarbon dating placed it to be over 300 million years old. Needless to say, this was a long time before any humans or their tools, for that matter, had ever been on this planet. So how did it get there? Nigel Watson, an expert of the extraterrestrial, believes this could be ancient evidence of aliens visiting Earth a long time ago, with the screw being a part of their landing craft on this planet. This screw could actually be part of many reports that talk of spheres, toothed wheels, manufactured bots and footprints embedded in rocks and stones hundreds of millions of years old. Government scientists insist that this is actually the result of a natural formation, even perhaps being an ancient marine animal that bears some similarity in its looks. However, with this particular rock formation secured in a research facility beyond independent geological and archaeological specialists, it is clear that we will not be getting to the truth of the matter anytime soon. Bigfoot's hair and the FBI. Peter Byrne, now 94, is certain Bigfoot is real. In fact, in 1976, Byrne was even able to get the FBI to test a hair sample from the alleged creature. As a young boy, Byrne was told stories of the Yeti of the Himalayas by his father. He credits this in sparking his interest in the unknown. In fact, he has an entire webpage devoted to his search for the elusive creature. He claims his search has taken him to the Himalayan mountains all the way to the Pacific Northwest of the United States. He claims he has seen 14-inch footprints on multiple occasions he sure belong to Bigfoot. Once landing in the Pacific Northwest, Byrne was all in 7 days a week. In the 1970s, an unknown sample of hair, a whole 15 strands connected by a patch of skin, was found at a campground in Washington state. This campground was the location of suspected Bigfoot activity. Byrne's group had submitted this hair to the FBI, and Byrne himself spent most of 1976 repeatedly writing to the FBI, pleading for them to test the mysterious sample. Finally, in December of that year, Byrne received a response. FBI Assistant Director J. Cochran Jr. wrote that while the FBI's laboratory is normally for law enforcement agencies and criminal investigations, occasionally, on a case-by-case basis, in the interest of research and scientific inquiry, we make exceptions to the general policy. Cochran then decided to have the hair tested. After countless letters and endless waiting, the results were back. The FBI had determined the hair was from the Deer family. You would think that this would discourage Byrne. However, that is not the case. Even after all this time, he is determined to find Bigfoot. Byrne answered a remorseful no, but that his very good friend had seen one recently. Although it's down to more of a hobby than a full-time job now, even at the age of 94, Byrne keeps searching for his childhood Yeti. William Bates back in 1902 in New York. A well-known doctor by the name of William Bates sends a messenger to deliver a note to his wife. "My dear wife," it says, "I am called out of town to some major operations. I go with Dr. Forsch, an old student, to do a mastoid, some cataracts and other operations. He promises me a bonanza. Too bad to miss the horse show, but I am glad to get so much money for us all. I am in such a flurry. I will write details later. Yours lovingly, Willie." It was not out of the ordinary for the doctor to be called away on spontaneous moments like this. But his wife, Ada Seaman Bates, found something in the note puzzling. Dr. Bates was already particularly successful as one of the foremost optometrists in the city. They were already very well off, and the doctor was also not one to talk about money like this. However, Ada set this to the back of her mind and thought nothing more of it. That is until several days had passed and the good doctor had still not returned home. His disappearance prompted a search not only by the local police precinct in New York City, but a wider net cast internationally by the Freemasons, the elusive organization that William Bates himself was a member of. Months passed and no news came Ada's way up until a letter arrived at her door. News from the chapter of Freemasons based across the Atlantic 3,500 miles away in London. A character resembling Dr. Bates had been located in a London hospital, but he was not living his day-to-day as a senior optometrist. He was merely a medical assistant. The mystery only deepened when it was revealed he first came to the hospital not as a doctor but as a patient. When he first arrived, he was so emaciated he could barely stand, looking haggard and thin, his eyes deeply sunken. This for a man whose sizable bank account should have ensured a life of luxury wherever he traveled to. Ada made the journey to England at once, but this was not to be a happy reunion. Ada Bates' joy upon seeing her husband again was short-lived. She was met with a blank stare from her long-lost husband. "I don't know why you bother, madam," he said. "We are strangers." But she was not one to let their long-standing marriage disappear like her husband had. He was persuaded by her, albeit begrudgingly, to move in with her to the Savoy Hotel where they might rekindle their relationship anew. Her efforts wouldn't pay off as a day later, William Bates snuck out of their room, never to be seen by her again. Ada never stopped searching, sending private investigators throughout Europe and to the eastern seaboard, but all in vain. She died clutching a photo of him, heavy-hearted and in anguish. But Dr. Bates' story would not end there. 8 years later, an acquaintance visiting Grand Forks, a small town of 12,000, stumbled upon a man who cast a great similarity to William. Again, there followed a clear lack of memories of his previous life. It was as if he had a chunk of his mind removed, like a slice of watermelon chopped away and eaten by an invisible monster, wrote the associate. Was this tale an episode of amnesia? Or perhaps the aimless wandering a man looking to find something more than money in his life, but only ended up losing himself? Whatever the case, William Bates passed away in 1931, leaving this disappearing act a mystery forever. The disappearance of Drake Kramer. Drake Kramer was 21 years old and looking forward to studying geology at college. Described as a loving and caring young man, it came as a shock when one day in 2015, he traveled alone to the Grand Canyon and was never seen again. Despite extensive searches involving helicopters and teams of searcher dogs trailing along dozens of miles of wooded areas and along the canyon rim, No evidence about Kramer's friends and family could not understand his actions. Excited about his upcoming studies, it made no sense that Kramer would suddenly pick up and leave everything without informing anyone. Just 2 days before Kramer was reported missing, he accompanied his father to a showing of American Sniper and was described as having been in good spirits throughout the evening. As a lover of nature, the Grand Canyon was one of Kramer's favorite places to be. In a Facebook post following a visit to the site with his aunt, he wrote of wishing he could stay there. But Kramer had never expressed interest before of going to the Grand Canyon alone. What's more, his father doubted whether Kramer had even taken the appropriate hiking gear with him. Kramer would have been more than aware of the dangerous winter conditions along the South Rim, which could be extremely snowy, with icy roads and trails and possible road closures. It seems absurd he would not have prepared himself properly for the excursion. This has led some to believe Kramer might have been suicidal. Before his disappearance, Kramer sent out a text message telling his loved ones that he had to give his body to Mother Earth. This might be an innocent reference to his love of the outdoors, but it could also be read in a darker light and indicate Kramer's depressed mental state at the time. Whichever way you read Kramer's message, the facts remain the same. Over 5 years later, there is still no sign of him, leaving his loved ones still searching for answers. Patricia Meehan. On the morning of April 20, 1989, 37-year-old Patricia Meehan left her home in Bozeman, Montana. The last to see her there was her landlord, who noted strange behavior, stating that she seemed hyper. 300 miles away on Highway 200 near Circle, Montana, Patricia's car was spotted driving the wrong way by Peggy Bueller and her father. Bueller swerved to avoid the collision, but the car hit the vehicle behind them. Inside that car was off-duty police dispatcher Carol Heights. After exiting her vehicle unharmed, Heights witnessed Patricia leave her car. Patricia walked up to Heights and, as she described it, appeared to look right through her. Bueller, who remained at the scene, described seeing Patricia standing off to the side, observing the scene like a spectator, not like it had happened to her. Bueller then watched as Patricia walked into an empty field and vanished. When the police arrived, they followed a trail of tennis shoe tracks, matching Patricia's. These tracks were found in an empty field, nearly 3/4 of a mile from the accident. They followed the trail until 3 a.m., but the trail eventually went cold, the tracks fading into the terrain. After 2,000 missing person flyers, countless searches and abandoned coal mines checked, there was no sign of Patricia. Her family could not explain the reasoning of why she was so far from home that very night. Even more peculiar, there have been over 5,000 reported sightings of Patricia. By June of 1989, 25 sightings had already been reported, including 3 from police officers. On May 4th, she was spotted at a Hardee's restaurant in Minnesota, reportedly drinking water alone for over 5 hours. On May 5th, she was seen twice, once inside a truck stop at Sioux Falls, South Dakota, drinking coffee through the night. Later that morning, she was seen with a man who appeared to be in his 30s. On May 19th, a sighting occurred near Patricia's home in Bozeman. Waitresses at a local restaurant noted she ate her breakfast hurriedly and appeared to be talking to herself. Later that week, she was reportedly seen at a horse auction in Billings, Montana. On May 30th, a trucker reported offering a female resembling Patricia a ride on a highway in rural Washington. She was also reported being seen at a truck stop near Tacoma. Sightings continued at truck stops all over the Pacific Northwest area. The last notable sighting was on August 30th, 1990. A woman with a strong resemblance to Patricia was arrested for littering in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. The sighting made the newspaper, but fingerprints later proved the woman was not Patricia. Despite all of these sightings and an exhaustive search of the Northwest by her family, a solid trail was never found. As of 2019, Patricia's disappearance remains unsolved. Bodman Moore. Back in early 1995, The British government received more than 60 reported incidents taken from locals of Bodmin Moor. These reported that the residents were encountering a large black panther-like creature in the countryside. For those unaware, black panthers are not native to Britain. What's odd, though, is hundreds of witnesses have reported seeing these creatures around Britain's countryside. They are said to have a large, powerful jaw, the muscled body of a big cat, being more than 4 feet in length and black fur, making it nearly impossible to see at night. This led to the government starting an official investigation into the area of Bodmin Moor to try to better understand the existence of the creature and whether or not it posed a threat to the residents. Shortly after the investigation began, a boy found the skull of a leopard on the banks of the nearby river. This caused many to speculate that perhaps there was a never-before-seen local species of large cats in the region. These creatures were then quickly given the name of the Beast of Bodmin Moor, which led to many experts trying to quickly assess the situation and better understand how a leopard could have arrived in the region. Many theories and myths have started that a rich private collector could have been illegally importing the creatures and soon freed them all throughout the region. A theory that would explain quite reasonably how the beast came to be and why it would be in the open areas of Bodmin Moor. Others believe that the Beast of Bodmin Moor is a direct descendant of the native wildcat species and that it's now starting to make a comeback. If the Eurasian lynx that used to call Britain its home and what people are reporting is a panther-like creature, also the lynx has a much lighter coloration compared to what eyewitnesses are seeing. This has led many to believe that an entirely different cat species is being witnessed. There have been other reports of leopard calls, hissing and growling. Not only that, but many photographers have captured these elusive creatures. As of today, what people are seeing remains a mystery. It's not just giant panthers that are seen in this area. A variety of other creatures and humanoids have been reported in the last few years. For the last 30 years, people have been encountering black-eyed children. These entities are said to have a dark presence, and when someone encounters them, they feel fear. Those who have encountered them say that they give off a dark energy and that it's left them feeling scared. Most of the people who have seen them want answers, but unfortunately are left with more questions than answers. The witnesses often feel that the children were somehow supernatural and could even read their minds. Over the years, many people have come forward with their encounters, and there seems to be a recurring theme. These black-eyed children usually prey on people when they are alone, and one of their main goals is to try and gain access to the person's home. It's not known what happens if they did gain access to your home, but some have come close. They usually say things like they need to contact someone, asking to come inside and use the phone. Most people would probably say yes if they saw a young person asking this, but it's the nature in which they say it. Most of the witnesses say that something doesn't feel right and that the energy around these people feel dark. A few people have reported having run-ins with these mysterious entities around the Bodmin Moor area. As of today, it's not known what these children are or what they want. Roman dodecahedrons are first mystery dates back to the Romans. It's a hollow object with 12 equally sized faces. The first Roman dodecahedron was found more than 200 years ago, and since then around 100 more have been unearthed around what was the Roman Empire. Some of these locations include that of Wales, Hungary, Spain, Italy, Germany, and France, to name a few. But the 12 faces are about the only uniform thing about the Roman dodecahedrons. Some are made of bronze while others are made of stone, and their size has varied from a golf ball to bigger than a football. In fact, one of the only things that experts are sure of when it comes to these mysterious objects is that they were extremely valuable. Many of the Roman dodecahedrons were made from metal, an expensive and difficult material to craft in Roman times, and were discovered in treasure hoards alongside other precious items such as coins. Beside their value, there hasn't been much agreement from experts into the purpose of the Roman dodecahedrons. Evidence is scarce. None were found with any inscriptions, nor is there any mention of the objects in contemporary documents. Experts having examined the Roman dodecahedrons have put forward uses of the objects spanning from knitting to weapons. Granted, some theories of the Roman dodecahedron's use have proved more feasible than others. For example, the idea that they might have been used as weapons has been dismissed by many experts. The usual heavy and robust lead balls the Romans favored firing from their slings in wartime sharply contrast to the light and delicate Roman dodecahedrons. However, the link between Roman dodecahedrons and weaponry cannot be completely dismissed. The different locations in which these artifacts were unearthed could link to war zones in the Roman Empire, and just because the objects might not have been used as weapons doesn't mean they weren't still in use in a military context. Hence, some experts have proposed the Roman dodecahedrons could have been used as a range-measuring object on the battlefield. This also explains why so many of these artifacts varied in size and shape. The differentiation of the objects would allow for different ranges to be measured. However, before celebrating that the mystery has been solved, some experts have questioned why the Roman dodecahedrons would then have no markings or inscriptions on them if they were being used as a military mathematical instrument. Another line of thinking is that the Roman artifacts might have held a mystical power for the Romans. One was found in a grave belonging to a wealthy woman in the Netherlands mounted onto a staff. Its placement suggests that it was seen as giving some magical power to the owner. Another related line of thinking is that the 12 sides of the Roman dodecahedrons might be a reference to Plato's statement. This was that a dodecahedron shape was used for embroidering the constellations on the whole heaven and the astrological zodiac. Therefore, some experts have proposed that the Roman dodecahedrons might have been used as astronomic measuring instruments to determine when to prepare the grain. If the Roman artifacts were held in such high esteem by the Romans, it would explain why so many show so little signs of wear and tear. Then again, there is no contemporary document to support this claim. It's important to come to one definitive conclusion of the purpose of the Roman dodecahedrons. The objects continue to baffle experts, but what can be agreed by all is the uniqueness of this Roman treasure. The Scottish wild man called Lelican, referenced across countless historical tales and Scottish legends, are the claims of the Scottish wild man, almost legendary in account, known as the Lelican. The first written account surrounding this wild man creature was made in the 6th century in the story titled The Life of St. Kentigern, of which described a wild man prophet named Lelican that resided near the village of Partick within the kingdom of Strathclyde inside the Caledonian forest. According to the ancient written legends, Lelican was a mystic of whom could see into the future as well as perform a variety of magical talents. He was believed to have gone insane for reasons not entirely specified and had lived his days out in the forest as a wild man unless he was needed by others for his magical talents. In a 15th century book entitled Lelican and the Kentigern, the book claims that the Lelican was also known as Merlinum, with a variety of other sources claiming that he was known as Mair Dyn Wilt. This has led many historians to believe that the Mair Dyn Wilt was the original Welsh character that the Arthurian tales of the wizard Merlin had been based on. Further research into Mair Dyn Wilt uncovers that the psychic had fought in the Battle of Aftred on the losing side and had completely lost his mind, causing him to move out into the wilderness away from anyone who might want to use him for his magical talents. Secret Chamber. Queen Nefertiti is considered a powerful and respected woman of the past. She was queen of ancient Egypt from 1353 to 1336 BC and may have even ruled over her kingdom after her husband passed away. Nefertiti is perhaps best known for her beauty and power. In 1913, an incredible bust of her was discovered and it instantly became a hit with the general. From that moment on, she was to become an icon in her own right. To this day, she is known as an important figure in ancient Egypt, as well as being a powerhouse of her era. Although she is perhaps one of the most famous figures from ancient Egypt, some of her history is shrouded in mystery. Egyptologists have suggested that she may be the daughter of a top advisor who would go on to become pharaoh after King Tut's death. Recently, a team of British and Egyptian archaeologists scanned King Tut's tomb. This took the researchers over 3 days, but they've said it could help to unravel one of the biggest ancient mysteries. Previous scans of King Tut's chamber showed researchers that there are other chambers and organic materials behind the walls. This could suggest that the famous Nefertiti is buried in one of these unknown chambers. It seems that interest in ancient Egypt is at an all-time high, and this is in part thanks to King Tut's discovery. Back in 1922, during a privately funded excavation by Lord Carnarvon, Howard Carter discovered the completely intact tomb of the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun. The artifacts retrieved along with the well-preserved body of the pharaoh helped to provide a clear image during the reign of Tutankhamun and life for ancient Egypt. The tomb was one of the most holding a variety of artifacts and clues as to many other Egyptian mysteries that Egyptologists were still trying to answer. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration was founded in 1958, and ever since then it's gone on to make some groundbreaking discoveries. NASA was established to research and develop vehicles and activities for the exploration of space within and outside of Earth's atmosphere. NASA conducts programs that focus in part on space operations. The U.S. government has the authority to provide technical assistance to the agency or the government in all its operations. However, if NASA's operations and functions are not the subject of substantial statutory oversight by Congress, it may act to prevent or delay actual or constructive activities of the federal government, or by the administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Various people have been lucky enough to work for this impressive company, some of which have been there during some of history's most incredible discoveries. These finds have put NASA at the forefront when it comes to space exploration, and they have captivated the minds of millions of people from across the world. Although these stories are incredibly impressive, sometimes it's the more mysterious ones that capture people's attention. This is usually because not much information is released, and the general public is left wanting more. One such individual who worked for NASA joined Reddit a few years back, and did an Ask Me Anything. It was submitted to the subreddit 5 years ago and said the following: I am a retired NASA engineer. I worked for NASA in its infancy beginning in 1954 up until the shuttle program. Ask me anything. My short bio. I was an RCA engineer contracted to work for NASA. From 1954 until 1988, I worked in the Range Safety Division for NASA before the Mercury program even began. I was able to witness firsthand the race to space, landing on men on the moon and more. I rubbed shoulders with von Braun. I've shaken hands with John Glenn, Alan Shepard, and more. My grandson is helping me answer questions." End quote. The questions at first were basic. One user asked what was a normal working day like, to which he responded the following: "Working day with no launch. My job was to ensure equipment was in good shape for the next launch. Very procedural. Working day with launch. Field with checks and tests done on a very rigid schedule. Everything had to be done at an exact time with certain checking being done and done successfully. They had to be done at the exact right time to fit in with the launch itself. There were times we couldn't test for things if the bird wasn't in configuration for it. So we had very narrow windows to test for things. Otherwise, we'd set off bells and sirens across the area." End quote. The next question that was asked was how was people after a failed mission? Was there a lingering sadness or were people ready to go? Determined to have the next one be successful? To which he replied, the conversation then moved on to unidentified flying objects, where someone asked where do they hide the UFOs. He said the following: "I did work on the B-29 in Roswell in the Air Force. There was one hangar they said not to go near." End quote. As you can imagine, this then caused people to start talking about the subject, saying that although they didn't release much information, it backs up what other workers have said in that there's certain places that are off limits. People in the comment section then went on to talk about Hangar 18, which is widely known by UFO enthusiasts as the location that the government hides the physical evidence of extraterrestrial contact, whether it be the remains of spacecraft debris, extraterrestrial equipment, and allegedly even the bodies of aliens. Allegedly, there's a highly guarded top-level clearance inside of the warehouse codenamed the Blue Room. Due to various sources, this location is home to classified information, and this comes from those that have watched there. It's widely believed that this Blue Room is the location where the United States government houses captured alien life and conducts experiments on them that often leads to termination. The notoriety of Hangar 18 goes back to the infamous Roswell event. This was where there was a recorded press release issued by the Roswell Army Airfield, stating that the personnel inspected the crash of a flying disc and that they sent it to headquarters for research. Shortly after, there was another press release from the Air Force Base in Fort Worth, Texas, claiming to be the headquarters that the remains were sent to, not by Patterson, and that the remains were only that of a weather balloon. However, throughout the years, the government's repeated use of the excuse of weather balloons and swamp gas became so cliché that much later in 1994 the Air Force would go on to state this was untrue, and that it was in reality testing a surveillance device that was designed to fly over nuclear research sites in the Soviet Union, which was equally backed by a complete lack of evidence. On multiple occasions, the Air Force has denied the rumors and stated there was never a building called Hangar 18. However, satellite imaging has shown that to be only semi-true, as there clearly is a structure named Building 18. However, many refuse to believe the misdirection away from Patterson, as it has been officially documented as the home of Project Sign, an initiative that was signed into action in July of 1947 and dedicated to studying reported UFO sightings. The project was converted into Project Grunge in 1949 and then into Project Blue Book in March of 1952, which led to the Blue Room theory. It was officially stated that Project Blue Book was only designed to study crashed Soviet aircrafts. However, Senator Barry Goldwater was recorded asking General Curtis LeMay for access into the base, with which LeMay was quoted saying the following, "Not only can't you get into it, but don't you ever mention it to me again." A very suspicious response to a request to see a bunch of shot-down Soviet aircrafts. So what do you make of these comments by a retired NASA engineer? And do you think they hid something in this Hangar 18? It's no secret that within the last few decades, interest in true crime documentaries have increased. But why is this? For many of us, true crime is gripping, and subscription services like Netflix know this. And it's one of the reasons why their true crime shows are some of their most popular. People have even made a living talking about and going in depth about these cases. Interestingly, when psychologists have been asked why so many people are interested in these cases, they've explained that it's actually quite normal. David Green, who teaches at the University of Law, said the following, "One of the key reasons that students are drawn to study criminal law, and why I believe the public are drawn to true crime documentaries, is the human interest factor. Crime can affect any of us, regardless of age, gender, ethnicity, or social status. It can happen at random times, and when it does, it can devastate people's lives." End quote. One case that's been studied by many is that of Ed Gein. As psychologists have said, you can pretty much pinpoint the exact moment where everything went wrong. For those unaware, Ed Gein was born in 1906 in Plainfield, Wisconsin in the United States. His actions would eventually reach Hollywood, where various movies would loosely be based on what he did. Those who studied the case said there were various red flags that pushed Gein to do what he did. During his early years, he had a rough childhood. His father wasn't really involved with his family and would also drink a lot of alcohol, whereas his mother was the opposite and would be in charge of the family, ensuring that everyone stayed in line. Augusta was not happy in her relationship and knew that she'd made a mistake marrying George, but unable to leave him because of her strict religious beliefs, Augusta began to despise not only her husband, but all men. Although she was notoriously difficult towards her family, young Ed idolized her, and it didn't take long for his older brother to pick up on this, even going as far as being concerned for Ed. In 1944, Henry, Ed's older brother, passed away under mysterious circumstances. A fire had quickly broke out near the family's home. Ed reported this to the police but said his brother was missing and that he couldn't find him. However, Ed led police directly to his older brother. Police noticed that there were bruise marks on Henry's head, but said it's likely this was an accident. It's never been proven, but most crime researchers believe that Ed likely had something to do with his brother's passing, and it could have come down to Henry constantly disagreeing with their mother's thoughts and opinions. Only 1 year later, Ed would lose his mother, and psychologists have said this was the turning point. He'd lost the woman he looked up to. He wasn't very sociable, so in his eyes, He'd lost the one thing he cared about the most. He'd grown up idolizing his mother. He never dated and would always look up to her to steer him in the right direction. It's known that spending long periods of time in solitude is bad for someone's health. But when you have someone constantly pushing their beliefs on you, you can start to believe that they're right. It's thought that Ed may have had problems when he was young. He was shy and would often be quiet in large rooms. He was also bullied. His possessive mother brought out the worst in him. With his father being a drunk, his brother becoming more distant from the family, and Augusta pushing her beliefs on young Ed, he didn't stand a chance. Some crime researchers have also said that where he didn't date, and due to his mother down-talking females and telling him that they were bad news, there could have been a chance that his relationship with his mother changed, and instead of seeing her as a mother, could have started to develop feelings for her. It's likely that he was attracted to females he would see around his local area, but didn't want to pursue those feelings as he was too scared to face his mother. Years of this meant that the only female figure he could look up to was that of his mother. After she passed away, he had no one. He was alone. He left her room untouched. And after this soon developed an interest in anatomy books. To earn money, he would take odd jobs around the town, although the majority of women didn't want him around, as they said they would feel a little uneasy. They said there was nothing really wrong with him, but he would always make them feel uncomfortable when he was close by, with some women describing that he would stare at them for long periods of time. After this, a local hardware store owner would go missing in 1957, and as Jean was one of the last people to see her alive, police decided to pay him a visit. It was here that the true horror unfolded. He was responsible for the passing of Bernice Wardens, the hardware store owner. Not only this, but he had been grave robbing during the night. Mysteriously, in 1958, Gaines' Houses of Horrors was destroyed by a fire, but who did it is still a mystery. There's some that suggest the local townspeople did it, not wanting to be reminded of the actions Ed Gain carried out. Losing a parent at any age is easily one of the most difficult things someone will face in their lifetime. And although we understand it's going to happen at some point in our lives, it never makes the process any easier. Pairing this with a mother who was overprotective and babied her son would only make this process even harder when it happened. Psychologists have argued that if Ed had a different upbringing, then the events that unfolded likely would have been much different. So what do you make of Ed Gain? And do you think that his mother had a part to play in what he did? Or do you think that even if he had a different mother, he still would have been the same? Robert Bigelow, a businessman and UFO enthusiast, purchased a ranch in 1996 at $200,000, where he established the National Institute for Discovery Science and installed substantial surveillance. At the time, he may not have realized what he was getting himself into, but this would be the start of an ongoing investigation, one in which has opened his eyes to some of the more mysterious things living on our planet. This ranch is known as Skinwalker Ranch, and researchers and investigators who have conducted tests on the ranch have said there's something going on there, with various people coming forward with their impossible-to-explain encounters, that in their opinion points to the fact that there's something otherworldly going on in and around this ranch. Bigelow and his team of researchers ultimately experienced more than 100 incidents on this property, but could not amass evidence that would be credible for scientific publications. Something that other researchers who investigated the ranch also struggled with. Bigelow later sold the ranch in 2016 of $4.5 million. When Bigelow has been interviewed about the ranch, he's gone on to detail that there's definitely a presence there, and seeing a mysterious portal and unidentified flying objects isn't uncommon. In fact, when he was interviewed back in 2017, he was asked whether he believes in aliens, in which he responded, "I'm absolutely convinced." He was then asked, "Do you believe that UFOs have come to Earth?" He responded with the following, "There has been and is an existing presence, an ET presence, and I spent millions and millions of dollars. I probably spent more as an individual than anybody else in the United States has ever spent on this subject. I've had a close encounter with a UFO. It really sped up and came right to their face and filled up the entire windshield of the car, and it then took off at a right angle and shot off into the distance." End quote. When asked where we can find alien life, he said that it's right under our noses. Interestingly, it's not just Bigelow that said it's tough to present evidence of the strange happenings on the ranch. Others who've been there have said there always seems to be something wrong when one of these events happens. One researcher posted the following statement: "During the early 2000s, I was sent in as part of a team to investigate Skamalka Ranch. When our team was carrying out tests on the ranch, we encountered mysterious lines along with various other things. Early on in the investigation, we noticed these blue UFOs flying around the sky that were able to suddenly stop and then fly away at extreme speeds. However, when the team tried to take photographs and videos, we noticed that the equipment would stop working. Fast forward a week, and once again we observed strange lights in the sky. However, same as before, when we went to take some photographs, the battery in our cameras suddenly drained. We then had cameras around the property and had them running 24/7. Fast forward 2 weeks, and again more mysterious lights could be seen in the sky. Once we checked the footage that had been recording the ranch, we discovered that the videos had cut out a matter of seconds before the crafts arrived. We found that this was something that kept happening. There was always something that would stop us from getting evidence. I now understand what people mean when they say that the ranch feels alive. It always felt like we were being played with." End quote. According to NIDS investigators, the private scientific research team deployed at the Skinwalker Ranch during its 20-year investigation for Bigelow Airspace and the United States government's Department of Defense. The Skinwalker, a creature that was seen in and around the ranch, could very well be an interdimensional creature that hops between universes and uses hidden portals found within the mountains, forests, and national parks of our country as entry and exit points into our world. In the documentary The Hunt for the Skinwalker Ranch, NID's researchers claim that while positioned on a ridge overlooking a basin, the team began to notice what they described as hovering balls of white light, and these were through night vision goggles pointed towards one of the middle homesteads on the property. As it hovered around 4 feet off the ground, the witness claimed that the white ball of light began to open up into an estimated 3-foot-wide circular portal. However, on the night vision goggles, a device that can detect and measure the infrared and ultraviolet radiation, the portal appeared to be more like a 3-dimensional tunnel hovering above the ground. The researchers then described that an 8-foot-tall, completely black humanoid creature slowly began to crawl out of the 3-dimensional tunnel, elbowing its way through the portal. The creature then grabbed the edges of the tunnel, pulled itself through, and dropped down 4 feet before running into the darkness. Shortly thereafter, the portal began to close in on itself, forming a bright white ball of light before fading in intensity and disappearing completely. Taking into account the strange sighting and encounter witnessed by the NIDS investigators, could this mean that the Skinwalker creature is in fact an interdimensional species that continues to invade our world via the use of self-creating wormholes? If wormholes could in fact be created by the creatures, Einstein had once theorized that due to the nature of the universe as a fabric of space and time, a wormhole could theoretically do more than just connect 2 points of space in a universe, and could also connect 2 points in time. According to the NIDS reports, there appears to be a substantial amount of evidence for strange connections between the distant past and present across the Shumwatcher Ranch. Families who also lived on the ranch before it was purchased were detailed seeing strange-looking creatures, along with things like bright, unidentified flying objects. Could this mean that the Skinwalker, once thought to only inhabit the Americas, made its way to the rest of the world? In an effort to tie this creature with even more modern sightings, stories of the Dogman Beast, a creature that is commonly seen as a derivative of the seems to contain direct links to that of the Skinwalker. So what do you make of these claims about Skimokorange? Do you think there's something happening within this area? And if not, what do you think the researchers are experiencing? Residents all around Las Vegas have reported seeing mysterious lights. Some of the first reports came in on the 1st of March when people posted photographs and videos of large balls of lights in the sky, noting that whatever these lights belonged to, they were big and that they stayed in a strict V formation. This caused others to say that these lights may have been part of one craft, further saying that if this was the case, the single object would have been huge. The lights were reported by people on different sides of Sin City on Monday, the 1st of March, with local residents saying the lights appeared at around 7:30 p.m. It soon started a trend on social media, with users wanting to know what the lights were. Due to Nellis Air Force Base being closed, some suggested that they may have been flares, but this doesn't match up with eyewitness testimonies. One man who said he worked with the Department of Homeland Security told several media outlets that the lights bear no resemblance to the military flares that he's experienced in the past, with others coming forward and saying that the lights didn't act like typical military flares, as they were very stationary and didn't move around like a normal flare does. After people started to demand answers for what was seen above Las Vegas, the Federal Aviation Administration did respond to those asking questions, and said that the lights from the Las Vegas Valley were flares from the NW military ranges. One person said the following on Monday: "Me and my wife looked up directly above downtown Las Vegas and saw multiple lights. We weren't the only ones who saw these, as I soon reached out to a friend and they said they'd seen the same thing. These glowing outs were hovering in a perfect formation for what I would say was around 5 minutes. When I spoke to my friend who'd also seen these lights, we both found it interesting how remarkably similar they were to the famous Phoenix lines. I, for one, don't think these were flares. I've observed military flares in the past, and these lights didn't drift or emit any smoke." Not everyone bought this answer, though, and said that various V-shaped UFOs have been observed in the past, and when questioned about it, officials normally blame the lights on things like flares. This soon created an interesting discussion, where people compared these lights to similar-looking lights that have been reported in the past. Those who study and investigate UFOs have said these shaped crafts are some of the most commonly shaped UFOs, and that most researchers agree that these lights are not individual objects, but rather belong to one large craft. There's still ongoing discussions within these groups as to whether V-shaped crafts and the triangle-shaped crafts are the same, with some amateur researchers saying that V-shaped crafts are more slender and have lights running up the entire craft, while the triangle UFO seems to have 3 distinctive lights which are usually white or red in color. Another question that often comes up is, who do these crafts belong to? Those who have studied this topic have said there's an argument for both sides, with some saying that these belong to us and they're part of a top-secret program. Interestingly, black triangles aren't anything new. Black triangle UFOs are a type of craft that have been seen in our skies for years now, and although we have various photographs and videos of them, there's still many unanswered questions. For example, how are they able to travel at the speeds they do? How are they able to use camouflage tech? And how can they hover motionless in one area without making a sound? It's these questions that have led some to think they don't belong to us. After all, we currently don't have any aircraft that's able to match what these crafts do. These black triangles are hundreds of years more advanced than our current tech. So where did these things come from? And how are they able to achieve what they do? At this moment in time, no military has come forward to claim it's them who's behind these sightings, but most UFO researchers think these black triangles are part of a secret program, and this is their latest creation. However, sightings and encounters have gone against this, saying that these crafts have been observed in our skies for decades. In fact, there's even photographs of these triangles that were taken back in 1945, with pilots from these times coming forward in detailing their strange encounters with strange triangular-shaped crafts. Not only does this mean that these crafts are at least 80 years old, but it also means that if they belong to us, our governments were using advanced tech in a time when the rest of the world had basic aircrafts. How did we have this type of tech during a time when battles were taking place using basic airplanes? As mentioned, it's one of the reasons that some UFO researchers believe these crafts don't belong to us. In fact, even military officials have come forward in detail with their encounters with them, demanding an answer for what they encountered. Many of these eyewitnesses would say these triangle-shaped crafts seem interested in their planes. Then, when they tried to get closer, the crafts would vanish within seconds, easily being much faster than the planes during those times. Interestingly, this led to these objects being given the name of Foo Fighters. As mentioned earlier, commercial airline pilots have also detailed their strange encounters with these large triangular-shaped crafts, with one pilot saying that he was flying above Florida when he saw one of these crafts fly past him at speeds exceeding 4,000 miles per hour. He said that he watched as this thing covered the curvature of the Earth within a matter of seconds. He said that he'd never seen anything so quick in his life. So what do you make of these interesting lights that were seen above Las Vegas? Do you think they belong to a mysterious craft? Perhaps one that belonged to the military? Or do you think these were just flares? The land of Papua New Guinea features thick, rugged jungles, beautiful coastlines, and sandy beaches that overlook the South Pacific reefs. In other words, it is a country full of biological and cultural diversity. With volcanoes, rainforests, and wetlands, it is everything you could want for an expedition. However, Papua New Guinea is one of the many homes for mysterious tribes that have been isolated from the rest of the world. These people still practice traditions that have been preserved for hundreds of years and changed little since. Without modern technology, they live lifestyles that are completely different from ours. But how exactly are those lives lived? And how would they react to a modern person? So today we'll be taking a look through the Yefwa tribe, the Mercy tribe, and the famous Papua New Guinea skeletons to see exactly what we will discover. The Yefwa tribe. Benedict Allen was only a 57-year-old dad and BBC presenter when he traveled into Papua New Guinea in search of a few mysteriously remote tribes. On this trip, he crossed the central mountain ridge on his way to meet the Yefwa tribe, who lived in the jungles of East Sepik surrounded by crocodile-infested waters. Known for the practice of headhunting, a tradition where the heads of intruders or enemies were decapitated, and it was a dangerous situation to go in alone. Along with the fact that the tribe was armed with bows and arrows, no one could predict how they would react to Allen. This was not the first time that he would meet the Yefwa tribe. On the first occasion, he wrote that, "Last time the Yefwa greeted me with a terrifying show of strength, an energetic dance featuring their bows and arrows." Then he writes that, "On this occasion, who knows if the Yefwa will do the same? Nor do I have an obvious means of returning to the outside world, which is somewhat worrying especially at my advanced age." After being dropped off by a helicopter, he went off-grid. But then, on October 11th, he posted a photo of himself on Twitter that announced he was marching off to Heathrow and told people, "Don't try to rescue me, please. Where I'm going in PNG, you won't ever find me, you know." By the time it came to the point where he was supposed to start his journey back home, there was no trace of him to be found. He had even missed his flight. Because Allen had no phone or GPS, there was no way to contact him. For many, this was considered to be unlike him and quite odd. A search was quickly conducted to find him, though it was a challenge. Papua and New Guinea had no mobile coverage and was dangerously uncharted. So it would not be easy. However, a helicopter did manage to locate him, and he was finally reunited with his family. Allen was found with a case of malaria after several storms had broken out and claimed that he was not lost. He wasn't able to find the UFO tribe again. Since that incident, the modern world has still yet to hear about anything of the remote tribe and its mysterious ways. Perhaps because of the dangerous conditions or out of respect, we may never uncover the secrets. Of the Yopo tribe. The Mercy tribe are a group of people found in the valley of the Omo River, in the country of Ethiopia in Africa. In a population of less than 10,000, the Mercy still follow some of the most traditional practices that have been carried down since ancient times. One of the most prevalent practices of the tribe involves the lip plates that the women wear, which represent fertility and marriage eligibility. The process for these lip plates starts when the girls reach puberty. Her lip will be cut and a small wooden stick will be inserted. The goal is to stretch the lips over time by inserting larger sticks at night until she can wear plates of any size and decoration. They can stretch as large as 12 centimeters in diameter, and it is said that the larger the plate, the more bravery and perseverance the girl has. However, the girls do not have to wear the plates forever. They usually only wear them when they are single or newly married when it comes to serving men food at events or attending donga, which is a dueling competition, and at dances. Later on into a marriage, a woman can slowly start to stop wearing the plates. The men must also prove their worth by participating in these danga duels to show promise toward their future wives. After arming themselves with a layer of protection made from animal parts, they'll use long wooden poles to duel until one of them surrenders or is knocked out. Apart from these customs, the Mercy also love to use body paint made from earth materials such as clay and minerals. It's not only as a decorative statement, but a symbolic one, as well as to ward off evil spirits, enemies, and be attractive toward the opposite sex. These elements also help to protect from the hot sun and act as an insect repellent. Those functionalities become even more important for men. They spend their days outside taking care of the cattle herd, which serves as their food and signs of their wealth. The cows can also be used as a form of currency when it comes to crop failures in exchange for some much-needed grain. In times when crops are thriving, the Mercy will grow sorghum that the woman can make into a thick porridge. As the men go out herding, the women will gather up firewood and water to cook all the ingredients together. Now that the Mercy tribe is being more recognized by tourists, photographers, and their government, some of the younger females are much more aware that their lip plates are not viewed as modern. That is why some younger women would rather not wear the lip plates anymore. However, many still are trying to preserve the plates as an important part of their heritage. Papua New Guinea skeletons. No, these are not real skeletons. They are not your average ones either. Meet the mysterious tribe of the Chimbu, who live in a mountainous region of Papua New Guinea and dress up as skeletons for their annual Mount Hagen festival. At this festival, over 60 highland tribes come together for 6 days to share their rich cultures and rituals. The Chimbu skeletons are one of the tribes that uniquely use body paint to transform themselves into a fearsome group of skeletons. Although very little is known about this mysterious tribe, it is known that they have long since painted themselves this way as a tactic to intimidate their enemies into believing that they are not human beings and that they possess supernatural power. The pairing of this display with dance makes the ritual all the scarier for the receiving tribe's end. The Western world only came to find out about the Chimbu tribe recently in 1934. As soon as that contact happened, the Chimbu have changed the way they paint. Now they take advantage of hand mirrors to make better precision to their artwork. Once the festivals take place, they'll take part in an event called a sing to celebrate with other clans. They might also participate in the legendary battle reenactments that take place, which can involve the participation of anywhere between 60 and 100 tribes. Along the way, the Chimbu might add feathers, pearls, and even animal skin embellishments to their body paint as a way to further dress up. To communicate with each other, they speak the language of Kumin, which is one of the over 800 languages that are spoken in the diverse country of Papua New Guinea. Outside of the festival, the Chimbu tribe remains in isolation most of the time. That is why the Mount Hagen event provides an amazing opportunity for people and visitors to catch a glimpse of the fascinating tradition and culture that encompasses these mysterious tribes. Even though the Papua New Guinea skeletons may seem scary and intimidating on the surface, the fascination and wonder of trying to find the answers to life's biggest mysteries always seems to work. But what do you make of these 3 tribal stories and their traditions? When we're young, most people find themselves watching popular and trending summer movies that feature pirates, treasure hunting, grand adventures, and endless exploration in the hopes of uncovering great secrets and untold riches. However, what most people don't know is that there's treasure and hidden secrets all around us, and these finds are usually made when we least expect it. Several years ago, an interesting discovery was made inside a woods in Russia. During an archaeological dig, historians discovered a locked box encased in mud. Due to the look of the box and how far they had to dig down, the archaeologists knew that whatever was inside had to have been under there for several decades. When they originally pulled it out of the earth, there was so much dirt around it that they had no idea what was inside. When they finally got the box open, they realized that the items were of historical importance, and that they belonged inside a museum. The box contained various artifacts dating back to Nazi Germany, with the archaeologists saying they knew this was what they were looking at because there was a German Reich mark, which was a form of currency used between 1924 and 1948, and there was also a card that identified the individual to that specific party. The box was like a time capsule, and one that made the archaeologists feel a bit uneasy. After taking out and inspecting all the items, it was made obvious that this belonged to a soldier who was fighting for Germany. As the archaeologists looked through the box, they discovered various different items, including newspaper clippings, shoes, and pieces of clothing. Interestingly, when the archaeologists took out the newspaper clippings, they said they were in great condition, and were quite surprised that they hadn't been damaged by the weather. Another incredible find was that of a box of cigars that was in great condition, with the researchers saying that these hadn't been touched and that they were in their original wrapping. The archaeologists said, though, that the discovery made them feel various emotions as a second box was discovered, and it's likely that the soldier was saving them in the hopes of celebrating in the event of a victory. The next thing they pulled out was 2 bottles of Jamaican rum. One thing the archaeologists did say was that there was nothing to indicate what happened to the soldier. Same as the box of cigars, the rum was unopened. Various other items were found inside the box which linked them to that particular party, including things like jackets and a camp. There was even an identification tag found within the box. But as mentioned, the archaeologists said they have no idea about what happened to the soldier. Another interesting discovery was made by a man who was helping to clean out his granddad's attic. As he was moving things out the way, he came across an old-looking chest. The first thing he noticed was the chest had Japanese characters on it, and after doing some research, he discovered that the book said, "Damage Control Gas Aid Kind." He was interested to learn more, and so shared some photographs online in the hopes that people could get him some more information on what he found. Various people who were interested in World War II were quick to let him know what an amazing find the box was, and that this was an item that doesn't come up very often. One person said the following, that there is one hell of a find. It's a Japanese squad level-filled medical kit from 1939. These cases were designed to be air and watertight when sealed, hence why everything shows very little signs of aging. End quote. Additional writing on the chest indicated that the box was made during the rule of Emperor Hirohito, who reigned over Japan from 1926 until 1989. The man soon started to unpack the box, excited to see what was inside. Various bottles of pills and other supplies made up the bulk of items found inside the box. He then found a large container and once again turned to the internet in the hopes of finding out what was inside. But it turned out it was just some harmless sugar water. The most interesting discovery, though, came in the form of another box. And after showing a friend, they were able to translate the writing. They said it translated to adrenaline novocaine atropine. Chillingly, these would have been used to treat the devastating effects of nerve gas. It's these types of discoveries that show us that sometimes we don't have to look far to find priceless artifacts. Historical artifacts are some of the most interesting finds out there. While gold and other minerals can bring you riches, when you hold a soldier's uniform or something of historical importance, these things have memories attached to them. And when you imagine yourself in that person's position, it can bring about various emotions. The advancement of science and history and expansion of our knowledge of the earth gives us a more comprehensive view of our world than ever before. Things like LiDAR technology has allowed archaeologists and researchers to map areas that they can't see. This technology has been used in dense jungle regions in order to help researchers see if there's any structures underneath it, and incredibly back in 2018. Over 60,000 Maya ruins were uncovered in Guatemala while using this tank. LiDAR imagery is a new tool that spots archaeological points of interest that would otherwise be invisible to humans. Using remote sensing technology, LiDAR uses beams of lasers pointed at the ground to create an image map of the area's surface. The beams then bounce back and the wavelengths are measured, giving an accurate picture of what lies below. The finding in Guatemala has made historians completely rethink what they thought of the Mayan people. Observing the thousands upon thousands of ruins, it could be possible that this civilization population was 3 to 4 times bigger than we once believed. Mr. Estrada Bellin, archaeologist working in the region, said the following: with this new data, it's no longer unreasonable to think there were 10 to 15 million people there. including many living in low-lying swampy areas that many of us have thought uninhabitable. So what do you make of these fascinating historical finds? And have you ever found something interesting by accident? Described as one of the most well-known UFO events in the world, the Roswell UFO incident is often credited as being the beginning of the extraterrestrial awareness movement and the catalyst for the emergence surrounding the study of unidentified flying objects and extraterrestrial encounters. Unfortunately, as the years have passed, a massive amount of misinformation has been grouped together with the original extraterrestrial claims, both from independent resources and the United States government themselves. So today, we'll be going over the extraterrestrial theories surrounding the Roswell incident and the events that were believed to have originally taken place. Sometime in July of 1947, residents throughout the city of Roswell, New Mexico began reporting sightings of a flying disc that demonstrated peculiar flight patterns while remaining completely silent. As rumors began to spread throughout the town surrounding the flying saucer sightings, several small news outlets local to the area began printing witness testimonies of the claims and their impossible-to-explain encounters, including detailed descriptions of the metallic nature of the craft, unknown light patterns, and otherworldly flight abilities such as sudden and rapid propulsion that no known human body could reasonably withstand. Although the articles were originally met with ridicule and contained a tongue-in-cheek kind of attitude on the events, a sudden development would soon change the public's opinion. At around the 8th of July, a rancher by the name of William Brazen, of whom was working on the J.B. Foster Ranch at the time, claimed to have seen a crashed disc cloud on the rancher's property, and so immediately contacted the local sheriff on the matter. In a rapid response, the nearby military caught wind of the event and quickly retrieved the disc-shaped craft for study at the nearby Air Force Base. The strange reaction on part of the military led to the following article being posted in the Roswell Daily Record, a local newspaper to the town. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday, when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the local sheriff's office. The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Not having phone facilities, the rancher stored the disc until such time as he was able to contact the sheriff's office, who in turn notified Major Jesse A. Marcel of the 509th Bomb Group Intelligence Office. Action was immediately taken, and the disc was picked up from the rancher's home. It was inspected at the Roswell Army Airfield and subsequently loaned by Major Marcel to higher headquarters. Despite the original photographs of the craft and the witness sightings over several days prior to the recovery of the unidentified flying object, all describing a flying saucer-shaped craft, the U.S. military would later provide a statement claiming that the recovered aircraft was nothing more than a downed weather balloon that was being used in a clandestine operation that would later be declassified in the early 1970s known as Project Mogul, a supposedly top-secret military project by the U.S. Army Air Forces involving the use of sensitive microphones flown on high-altitude balloons, of which had the primary purpose in use of long-distance detection of sound waves generated by Soviet atomic bomb tiers. However, unfortunately for the United States military, there are tremendous holes in their manufactured weather balloon cover story, such as the fact that the Air Force was not aware of the downcast location until alerted by the foreman of the ranch, but would later make claims that the weather balloon contained sensitive radio technologies that could have easily allowed for the craft to have been located via radiolocation. Or the fact that efforts to listen in on worldwide nuclear testing sounds would be more accurate with the positioning of the balloons having been stationed much further west, rather than being stationed close to Roswell. Additionally, photographs would later surface showcasing Major Jesse Marcel, posing alongside the original downed aircraft, of which would later be replaced with artificial debris at a later time. Witness testimony would later corroborate the claims of a government-involved cover-up and a manufactured story, as Bill Brazel would later come forward to claim that his father, Mac Brazel, was the victim of witness interrogation on behalf of the United States military. This was after having been incarcerated after talking to UFO researchers Charles Berlitz and William Moore. Berlitz and Moore would later end up writing a book titled The Roswell Incident, which would detail the mountains of evidence of the government cover-up story, including witness testimony from Bernie Barnett, a civil engineer who worked with the United States government, who described viewing an alien wreckage in recovered alien bodies. Although rumors of recovered alien bodies would continue over the next several decades, It was not until the 28th of August back in 1995 that evidence would surface throughout the extraterrestrial awareness community when a private collector by the name of Ray Santilli purchased high-quality, leaked footage of a 17-minute video taken by the United States that showed the autopsy of an alien body in vivid detail, and released the footage to the public without restriction. Unfortunately, to this day, Santilli has promised to keep the identity of the people involved in the transaction of the film a closely guarded secret, as to not risk legal repercussions or retaliations from the United States military. Unfortunately, this has led many skeptics into claiming that the entirety of the footage has been faked, despite evidence from unbiased third parties pointing to their legitimacy. One such example came from noted forensic pathologist Sarah Wong, who claimed that the autopsy procedures were incredibly authentic and the removed organs and movement of the chirogulated blood appear to be all perfectly genuine in all aspects. Additionally, testimony from award-winning special effects makeup artist Dan Winston claimed that the effects used in the autopsy footage were far too realistic to have been done on a small budget, and would be a complicated task to replicate for even a major Hollywood studio that had a multi-million-dollar budget, and that it's very unlikely they could have done this during the 90s, let alone impossible to have been made during the 1940s. Even more compelling, Dr. Kit Green, a research scientist working for the Central Intelligence Agency, would later release an 11-page memory report that detailed the validity of the video, as he had been told by the Central Intelligence Agency that not only was the video legitimate, but was to be studied for gathering information on extraterrestrial creatures. At the time, Dr. Kit Green had viewed the footage. However, it was before the video had gone public, providing supporting evidence that a government whistleblower was at the center of the released footage. It's believed that slides within the footage are genuine, and that the Central Intelligence Agency even bribed him to hide facts about the alien autopsy. As of today, many believe these things were not being told about the Roswell incident. So what do you make of Roswell? What do you think happened? And do you believe the ranchers did recover a mysterious craft?